Going up in the winter between the back door and my office, come snow, come hail or shine, every night footsteps used to follow me in the dark in the winter, and I didn't like it one little bit. And the dogs don't like it much either. I've always thought this house was a fairly normal house, but just lately it's become extremely strange.
Had a quick look outside. Nobody there at all. I then found it was quite difficult even to shut the door.
But things didn't stop there for Alan Clark that night.
You hear the expression of the hair stands on the back of your neck, stands up on the back of your neck. And I never really believed it. But this really did sort of happen.
Tom Foole's presence pervades the castle. It's at its most disquieting by his macabre portrait. A scowling Tom Foole, he stands beside his will, a document that predicts his own death by drowning. One tourist had a frightening experience while looking at the painting.
He's an evil-looking man, isn't he?
She was convinced that she'd heard footsteps on stone, a claim that surprised the local investigator into the hauntings.
When I interviewed her, sometime after the experience, I pointed out to her that the stairs and the corridor were indeed fully carpeted. And she'd never actually realised this, even after the experience, and she'd thought that she'd had a strange experience. She'd never actually made the connection between the stone footsteps and the fact that that wing of the castle is fully carpeted.
James Cartland is an archivist and a family friend of the Penningtons. In the early 80s, he was invited to stay at Muncaster. His hosts put him up in the tapestry room, in a wing of the castle now little used.
I'd heard this sort of strange, difficult to describe it. It was a sort of, as if somebody was talking, but muttering, sort of strange sound. I can't really explain it. I stuck my head up the chimney. I thought, well, it might be the wind in the chimney, but it never is. It was a very, very quiet night, very frosty and quiet. I was the only person in that wing of the castle, so there was nobody else there to make a noise. Absolutely the only person. Everybody else was at the other end. And went back into the room, and it was still going on. And it was more audible by then. I mean, it was definitely a child crying and somebody talking to it, as if a child was ill or something like that. I got back into bed. I never slept a wink. Terrible night.
Lord Carlisle told me that he'd only once stayed in Muncaster, and that time it had been in the tapestry room. And he'd woken up in the middle of the night with the sound of a baby crying in the room, and there was no baby in the room. He said he's never been more terrified in his life. And he was a man who got the MC in the last war, so he wasn't a man who was easily frightened. But he said nothing would get him to stay in Muncaster again. That was one thing that was quite certain.
No one testimony is proof that Muncaster is haunted, but to investigators, these accounts over a long time add up to an impressive case.
Muncaster not only makes the grade with the witnesses' testimonies, it far surpasses the level of criteria that you're looking for, which basically revolves around the correlation of stories over a vast period of time, or even at the same time if you had a collective experience. Without prior knowledge, that's the key. The only other way you could explain it would be mass collusion, and on that scale, spanning decades, from people that no way ever met each other.
I came across some old plans, and I discovered that when the castle was altered in the middle of the 19th century, the room, the tapestry room, had been part of the old nurseries, and that those rooms had been cut up or altered in some way. And so I immediately thought, my goodness, those children lived in those rooms. They were the nurseries. It's rather unnerving.
Annie Preston, who was a lady who lived in the village, who died last year, aged 92, told me that her grandfather put Margaret Elizabeth, the daughter of Gamel, Lord Muncaster, into the family tomb. She was the last person to be put in there. And also he said that she had screaming fits before she died.